I always enjoy it, despite a couple of hundred episodes up my sleeve, to have a chance to go back and forth with someone I've just been spoken to via podcast episodes or through their own website. So it's nice to finally have you in front of me. I was just explaining that majority of the audience here would fit into the category of relatively new, probably like in the first couple of years of running. And so the idea of establishing how to become a healthy runner, I think is like a nice foundation to build from. Maybe as a way just to um, give a little bit of an overview of who you are and what you do, I could handball it to you, and you could just give a bit of an overview of Spark and Healthy Runner and who it is that you work with.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks for having me on, Tyson. I appreciate the invite. And I think my journey in creating kind of Spark Healthy Runner, it pretty much goes back to, maybe if I just share the story of kind of one of the lowest points in my life is, when I couldn't sit for like more than 10 minutes because I had pain at my sit bone in my upper hamstring tendon, which like ironically wound up being the beginning of like one of the lowest points in my adult life. And I was pretty much at the stage of life where you are now with like two younger kids. So I was at that point of always working out, during my life and, being a quote unquote gym rat and, would always exercise, stay in good health. And I was in my early 30s and, I couldn't sit literally to like, I was working in a clinic as a physical therapist at the time. And, I had this pain in the top of my hamstring and I was, getting that dad bod because I wasn't able to work out. And, I had this injury that was something that they didn't teach in physical therapy school. No one talked about proximal hamstring tendinopathy. It was something that I learned about in getting like advanced certifications. I was in the sports medicine realm. And, I was like, what is this pain? And it is something that is a lot different than the traditional injuries that you learn about as a physical therapist. So I went down like the deep dive on researching it and trying to find like the best information on how do you actually get rid of this stubborn pain in the butt. And, I was Googling things like crazy. And I was like at this point where I learned that one of the worst things you could do is actually stretch the hamstrings, which a lot of people, when they strain their hamstring, they injure it, they're like, oh, let me stretch it. That'll make it feel better. So I really saw that there's a different approach to looking at this injury. And it really opened my eyes up to treating middle-aged runners. And I was now in my mid 30s at this point, is a lot different than just treating like adolescent athletes. And I think most sports PTs, physios, over here in the States, you really get good at treating those younger athletes and you know how to get rid of their hamstring strains, right? If they were like sprinting. But middle-aged adults get different running related injuries that do need to be treated a lot differently. And that's really where I went down like the deep dive of being like, oh, there are specific things that we can help like the adult runner population. The biggest thing that I really came away with is like runners need to train in order to actually run. And most runners do it because they love running. Either they grew up with running like you did. I heard, a lot of your backstory, as a youngster, and you continue it as you go into your adult years. Myself, I was like an adult onset runner at, age 31. And I got into running because I actually had hip surgery and I had a labral tear in my hip and a piece of cartilage flaked off playing some backyard volleyball during my daughter's actually birthday party. And, we like to have some fun as adults, right? You got to be competitive. And I wound up getting a hip arthroscopy and my surgeon was like, I was telling them like, hey, out of shape. I had to be on crutches for like 6 weeks, non-weight bearing. I had this like microfracture technique that they did. And I was like, how do I like get back in shape? And I've never been like out of shape in my life. And he's like, just go for a run. And I used to run for cardio, we'll call it, quote, in air quotes here, after my workouts in the gym. And he's like, go outside and run. I live more in the Northeast in the States, so it's pretty cold. And this was like still winter. I'm like, I'm going to go outside in the cold weather and run. All right, well, let me try it. Did it. I remember that first run, I went from the gym, ran outside. I was like, wow, this is like kind of freeing. I kind of like this. And then, one thing led to another where I got into running and I really just started, falling in love with it. And, the challenge as an adult, hey, let's sign up for that first 5K, and actually did like pretty well. And I was like, wow, I like finished in kind of like the top 10%. And I'm just like new at this running thing. I'm like, maybe this would be kind of cool to, jump in these races and challenge myself as an adult. And then that's when, boom, the hamstring injury occurred. And that was like the first running related injury I got. And, I realized that there's a lot of information out there that the running community doesn't know. And that's where, the beginning of my passion started, for helping the running community, and why I wanted to share, the Healthy Runner podcast with the world, and how we really can get stronger, which is really key for us as adults, is to get the strength and get stronger as runners in order to run faster, so we can actually enjoy this for longevity, right? And to be a lifelong runner. And most adults, everyone that I hop on calls with, everyone in our community, does it for the stress relief. And, I like to call them the mental clearing miles, where we can just kind of clear our head, deal with like the stresses of life. And in order to do that as an adult, like, there really requires kind of 6 different elements and like 6 steps to growing in our running journey. And that's kind of the epiphany I came up with, beyond the strength training aspect, as like my background as a physical therapist. But when I became a run coach, learned a lot more, and realized there's like these 6 kind of key elements to kind of growing in your running journey. And that's really how, a long-winded answer to how like Spark Healthy Runner was founded. And, that's kind of our belief, is that in order to do this for longevity, there are things that we need to do beyond the running that we're doing, so we can be able to run for longevity.
Yeah, great answer. I was keen to pick your brain around the 6 things, but before we sort of run down that rabbit hole, isn't it frustrating? I've had the same injury with my calves as what you just described with your hamstring, and I was lucky enough for a long time in my running career never to have injuries, and so I felt the grab of a calf strain when I first did it. And you're right, the thing that feels the best is to stretch it. And ironically, I don't know why it is. It's like breaking a bruise. You shouldn't do it, but there's something so satisfying about it.
Right.
I don't know what that is, but it is. I always find it counterintuitive that something so bad feels so good while you're doing it. So it's no surprise, I guess, that so many athletes who are relatively new to that world of injury, in the way that we just described it, struggle with the recovery, because there's like a lot of stuff that the body says, hey, yeah, no, go down this direction. But the actual results of that action goes, you know what? Now you're going to be on the sidelines for a little bit longer. Obviously your foundation or your background in the world of being in the gym and being a PT probably had you well equipped for the journey of trying to establish some ground rules for what makes a stronger, healthier runner, particularly going into middle age. Was it just purely through your own subjection to injury that you were forced to kind of consider what some of these scaffold points might be?
Yes, it definitely was. As I, started as an adult onset runner, I realized that I was basically doing like a lot of the common mistakes that many runners do when they start out, is that they're, going too hard, going too fast, right? Like running their easy runs, too fast. And looking at it from the approach of exercise, cardio, you got to go hard. You think spinning classes in the gym, or, when I'm working out in the gym, like I'm usually going hard and you're breaking a sweat. And, they, there are these, other elements of running that really play a role in how we stay healthy. And we can definitely get into those, but it was also, I actually did kind of segueing from like the clinic life. I went down the academia route, went back to school, got a PhD, and started, teaching at a university in a DPT program, and did a lot of research. And I kind of focused in running related injuries, and, looked at the high rates of, running related injuries. And literally 7 to 9 people listening to this right now are going to suffer like a running injury within the next year or two. And I'm like, those rates are extremely high. And the reason why most people do get injured is due to runner error, meaning like they're doing something that they could actually change their behavior and they just don't know about it. Right. So like trying to grow as a runner is like super overwhelming. And, if you don't have actually a plan, not just a run plan, but a plan in how you stay healthy as a runner, then, you know, you are unfortunately going to, get in that injury cycle. And I just hate that there are so many runners out there. And I know there's a previous episode of a guest that you just had on recently, and she spoke to it very well in that the medical community still hasn't caught up to how we do treat running related injuries. And there is this stigma by a lot of medical professionals who are not runners that they don't understand. They don't get it. They don't understand the mental benefits. They don't understand that running is literally the magic pill and can help all of your systems in your body to maintain better health for longevity, right? And prevent medication, surgeries like, mortality rates, all of that stuff down the road. Where they see someone who wants to run a marathon or ran a marathon and they have this knee injury or they have shin splints, they have plantar fasciitis, and they just tell them like, well, maybe running is just not meant for you, or maybe your body isn't, meant for running anymore, or now you're in your 40s, now you're in your 50s, probably marathons aren't for you anymore. Right? Like they have that mindset, which is not backed up with any evidence whatsoever. And it pains me, honestly, for runners to feel that way, have to go through that, have to go through like, there are runners I help that haven't run for like 5 years because they've had, PHT and upper hamstring pain, when there are strategies to get over it. And there are ways to actually get back into running. And actually, one of my clients today literally didn't run for like 5 years because she had a stubborn posterior tibial tendon pain that couldn't go away. And she wound up gaining, lots of weight during that time period. The quality of life certainly went down. Her health, mentally, all of that, it affected her life. Literally within 16 weeks, we got her not only pain-free, but back to running 4 days a week. And she's up to like 7-mile long runs now. And she's just loving it, going out with her friends again, being able to enjoy running and have that be a part of her life again. So kind of that was like my big, pain that I saw, that, people don't need to actually stop running, even if they're in their middle-aged years. There are ways that we can do this. And there are ways that in most running related injuries, you can actually continue to train and run through. You don't need to stop running for 6 to 8 weeks and go to PT or go to rehab in order to get better.
Yeah, I think it's so encouraging to hear that. I mean, I love the story about your athlete you just shared running 7 miles. One thing that I was introduced to at the same time when I started to get these calf strains and recover from it was how lazy people are with their diagnosis of it. And I'm not talking about people in your shoes who are actually qualified to give a diagnosis. I'm talking about mates that I would run with, or just people that I would meet in the street, where I'd go, I've strained a calf. And they go, old man injury, get used to it. And like, it was all said tongue in cheek and it was supposed to be funny, but it just riled me up, because I think what riled me up about it is it's just, I get frustrated when people take a really broad, lazy approach to diagnosing an injury, especially when there's so many success stories, especially when there's people well and truly older than you and I both, who are running very successfully every day without any injury. So I go, okay, well, if these people are doing it, obviously there's something that I'm missing. And what I realized is, like, old man injury is essentially, and feel free to correct me if my description of this is wrong, but what I realized, it's just like an out of use muscle trying to get back into the form that or back into the intensity that you used to give to it too soon, maybe too quickly. And the secret seems to be that if you can just build up a little more cautiously over a longer period of time, and pay attention to how your body's responding to the work, chances are you're going to have quite a successful return. But that seems to be where most runners fall short.
Absolutely. I would totally agree. And it is just a matter of, in like someone like yourself, thinking of training a little differently, like the things that you could get away with in your teens and 20s, where you can literally just lace up your shoes, I'm sure, and just go out and start running. Um, in our middle-aged years, we do need to do certain things. So with your calf injuries, if the root cause of that, let's say, is an ankle mobility issue or a flexibility issue or just literally a muscle activation issue, like, you need to address and do your exercises that are going to help those areas before you go for your run. And like do a 5-minute dynamic warm up, right? To like get blood flow into your tissues, into your muscles, into the tendons, to actually warm the tissues up so they are ready to actually start running. And it's just amazing how many runners still don't do that. They just think they can, put on their shoes, get out the door at 5, 6 a.m. in the morning and, think that running or think that running should feel good at that, time period. So it just takes a little bit more, um, being smarter, right? And just knowing what are the things that you need to do for your body right now that's going to allow you to actually run. And it doesn't take a tremendous amount of time. Like you don't need to do an hour yoga class like before you go for your run to limber your whole body up, right? It is literally 5, 10, or in some cases, if someone has a lot of things going on, depending on their case, like 15 minutes. Like they're going to actually get their body prepared to run. And then they go for their run. So yeah, that is very common, that I see, people chalk it up to like, oh yeah, just you're getting old and, those things are to be expected. And, you will have to continue to like fight through those and you don't, right? Like there are strategies. I'm sure you've learned, a lot of those strategies in your journey.
Yeah, for sure. It's my background is stand-up comedy. I do a lot of that here in my
Oh,
spare
did
time.
you really?
It's sort of gradually becoming my major passion. I'm sure the audience is sick of hearing me speak about it, but there's so many correlations. I guess like any areas of life that you're sort of fully invested in, you start to see those correlations. But what the difference between a good run and a bad run is sometimes similar to the difference between a good set and a bad set. Like there's so many different variables that you can adjust. And sometimes I'll drive home from a bad gig and I go, was that my jokes? Was that the audience? Was it the structure? Like what was it exactly? And
Right.
it's really hard to sometimes put your finger on. And I apply that same kind of thought process to my running. And you go, it's no wonder people get overwhelmed or confused with how to avoid injuries because a lot of the time there's 15 different things taking place at the same time: volume, intensity, training structure, recovery, nutrition, whatever else it might be. That they go, I don't know, like maybe I am just an old man and can't do it anymore. It sounds like this. I don't know her name, but this lady you just gave as an example of the who's back out running with their friends 7 miles is a great success story of someone who, with the right approach, can actually overcome these little niggles and return to running with a whole heap of joy. What was that approach for her? Like, I'm assuming your 6 steps that you've referred to as probably a big catalyst for her successful return.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that is someone like I worked with personally where we did identify like, the root causes of why she was having this pain and address those like we had talked about, which is super helpful in looking at like the holistic approach. But, generally speaking, for any runner to have success, whether they're injured or not injured, um, you really do need to like maximize these 6 steps or key parts of your running journey to not only feel like more confident actually getting stronger and faster, but like stay healthy along the way and enjoy the process of running again. And, be able to crush some races if you like to challenge yourself and, you like to go out for like the park run, right? Or, being able to get to your local road races. And those 6 parts are really like mindset is number one. Number two is strength training. Number three is the run plan. Number four is nutrition. Five is recovery. And then six is your race strategy for those that do like to, you know, participate in races. So it is a matter of like looking at all of those components of your training and not just the run plan, which people tend to focus on, whether they're, working with a coach, they're getting a download, or, they're now it's, every like AI, app out there is having training plans, or every watch, right, is going to give you a training plan. And I do often see a lot of runners getting injured because they're just following the training plan on their watch for their half marathon or their marathon, and they're not taking into account these other 5 parts literally of their running journey. And then they're not actually modifying the run plan part from their watch due to their life stressors that are going on at that moment in time. So yeah, I'm not sure if it's helpful to kind of dive into like each of these 6 steps. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I think that's great. Just on your chat GPT or the AI conversation, for anyone listening, here's a fun little challenge for you. And I'm sure they'll catch up to it in the next couple of years. But I did like a little experiment recently where I put in some of my details. I spoke about I was trying to be as specific as I could about who I was, how far I could run. And I said, could you draw me up a 12-week marathon plan? And just to be cheeky, at the end of it, I said, oh, this doesn't seem to be enough miles. And it said, yeah, you're right. You got me. Actually, that's a good point. And I did that about 12 times and it just kept ramping up the miles. And
Oh
then I
my
said,
goodness.
reverse. And so it was really interesting because you look at it. I've seen a lot of videos speaking about like the confidence in these race plans, but all you have to do is ask it one simple question at the moment. And I'm speaking about Chat GPT, but I couldn't help but laugh because it was like I was affecting its confidence levels in its prescription just on the questions that I was asking. And yeah, to your point, one of the things I love working with the athletes that I'm coaching that most closely on is like, what was your physical response to a particular session that we went out? Do we need to adjust your recovery days? And yeah, I've always had that problem a little bit with just generic training programs in the sense that so many elements of a successful program, like you've just touched on, seem to be completely forgotten. If you're happy to delve into those a little bit more, I'd love to, because they're all subjects that I'm really fascinated about. And I still think, despite the fact that I've had quite a few guests on here speaking about mindset, as a start point, it could be good because it still seems to be quite an overlooked area of running performance, particularly when the conversation of your run plan is on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just kind of framing this, I like to use the analogy of like building a house, right? Like your running should be reliable, durable, like a well-built house, right? That is going to be able to give you like memories with you and your family for like years to come, right? So kind of each of these 6 steps, like the mindset would be like the analogy of actually the design and planning of someone building a house, right? They don't just like literally start to build a house by just putting the frame up of the house, right? Like they actually have to design it. So this is really where, as runners, we need to think about aligning our mental priorities and making sure that whatever running goal you put on the table, whether it is to run your first marathon, run a half marathon PR, does that align with where you are in your life right now? And are you going to have the time and the mental strength and the mental fortitude, if you will, to be able to train for this hard event that is going to challenge not only your body physically, but also mentally? Stress is stress to the body. So physical stress is going to be more emotional and mental stress as well. So if you are just recently got a promotion or starting a new job, this would not be the time to like train for your first marathon. If you recently got a divorce, if you're getting a new house, moving, right? Like all of those big life factors that might be going on in your life would not be the time to actually, go after this like main, goal race of yours. So I think about like my girls are a little older, high school. I have one in college now, but they did travel volleyball. So the busy season is in the springtime. I used to love doing an April half marathon every year. Once they started doing travel volleyball, we're literally in a different city every weekend: Philly, Boston, DC, Atlanta. We're going, a lot of travel. Extremely hard to be predictable and get your long runs in, right? And being able to actually, do these. I love doing destination long runs, don't get me wrong, but she's got to be on the court at like 7 a.m. in the morning. I'm not going to wake up at 4 and, put on a light up vest and like run in some, neighborhood I don't know about, right, to get that long run in. So, you just have to think about, is my life circumstances ready for whatever goal, right? And then also, think about, okay, am I being realistic in whatever running goal that you set? If you want to try to get a sub 4 hour marathon, right? Sub 2 hour half marathon, whatever your goal is it realistic for actually what you're doing? And then really time blocking your schedule is kind of part of this mindset piece, and just like aligning your mental priorities and, when am I going to be able to get my strength training in? When am I actually going to be able to run? Right? Like all of those elements kind of go into this like mindset bucket. But then, there's definitely advanced strategies as you really get the mind calm for like race day, and whether or not you're using visualization techniques, in race techniques, whether it's mantras, reflection based on performance. So all of those elements kind of fit into this like mental or mindset bucket, if you will. And they are important parts in us growing in our running journey and decreasing pre-race anxiety. Like I had a bout of that for my second marathon, had the worst pre-race anxiety, tore up my gut. I visited the porta potty for the first time and, ever at a race, multiple times. And there are things that we have to calm the mind in order to like take on these challenges. So those are some of the elements in that like mindset bucket.
Yeah, really good. I think one of the things that really helped me was, and still I've got to be conscious of this because, and it doesn't matter whether it's running or some other area of life, but just that comparison being the thief of joy in your own particular pursuit. Like nothing. I remember at the age of 21, we had Ryan Gregson. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's gone back a little while now. He was just like a junior gun. He was the Australian track and field, Australian 1500-meter record holder for a little while there. And he just shot onto the scene as like a 16 or 17-year-old kid. And I remember being 21 and this kid was running faster times than me, and nothing stripped away joy from training. Just thinking about, man, this kid is 4 years younger. He's already dominating. um, but I found what was really helpful for me was just, starting to refocus that attitude or refocus my sights on, okay, like what can I actually control? Where can I actually improve? And when you start to do that and see the improvements in your own performance, really, like when it comes down to it, it's all you'd have the capacity to change, isn't it? And so for me, that was one that was really helpful. And I still have to keep myself quite accountable with that in whatever it is that I'm focused on right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, as you kind of challenge yourself, and you do need to put it in the perspective of life and that this is running, right? But we can be hard on ourselves. We can compare ourselves to others. And your journey is your journey, right? So, you set your personal goal. And, I like to, with a lot of my athletes, not only, set those outcome goals, whether, pretty much usually they're either distance, right? You're covering a distance for the first time, or a time on the clock, and you're looking for a certain time at a race. But as you know, like Tyson, there are so many variables, right, that go into whether or not you're going to actually get that time on the clock on race day. Whether it is just weather, right, like other circumstances, course, terrain, what happened in your life leading up to that, right? There are all these other circumstances that a lot of times we don't have control over. So really focusing on more the process goals, and did you execute, right? Like the plan, did you execute the process? Did you put yourself in a great position come race day because you did prioritize your sleep, right? Maybe during a training cycle, or at least at minimum, the week or two leading up to the race, so your body can perform. Did you actually, make sure that you were hydrating and got in your nutrition and your carbs before your race? Did you, make sure that you didn't, run more miles than you should have, or that you kept your easy runs really easy leading up to the race? Or like, did you actually, follow the pacing strategy that is going to give you success on race day? Or did you wind up going out too hot and you just got a little overconfident, thought this was your day, that you were going to have this amazing race, and you really weren't running at the fitness level that you truly should have been, as opposed to just going for this aspirational pace and, trying to get some time on the clock. So really like focusing on some of those process goals and fueling properly. And when you got negative thoughts, like were you able to shift your mindset in the race? And were you able to pull some tools out of the toolbox to be able to get over that? And how did you adjust when, things went wrong during the race? So it is important to focus on a lot of those process things. And when you reflect on races, it's amazing because the primitive brain is going to go right to, I didn't hit that time goal. Man, this was like a downer. Like this was a bad race. This was negative. But it's amazing when you reflect on the things that went well and you write them all down and you journal them. And what are the things that didn't go well? You're going to see there's literally 15 to 20 things that you did well. And there's like one or two that you didn't. And then when you see that, and then it's like, oh, I can be proud. Like, look at all these things that I did. And that's how we grow and that's how we learn, right? And we get better, right? We make adjustments and we learn how to, tackle that element that you were missing, so you can improve.
Yeah, every race as a rep is like something that I always like to think of. I apply that in comedy as well because sometimes you'll get down, you go, that was horrific. That primitive brain, I like that description because you're right. Like I can have a mildly good gig, but the primitive brain would be like, but you stuffed up this and you suck and blah blah. But then when you come back logically and you do, I do that exact process that you just wrote down. I'm like, all right, let's just reflect on what went well and one thing can improve. And when you do that, it is amazing how much more optimism you can take and how much more hope you can take about your potential not just being flushed down the drain. There's always quite a bit to celebrate. That's really good. I can't remember the second point. I'm racking my brain to get it, but you've got mindset, and then you move into
Yeah. So the second step is really the strength training, because we need to develop a strong running body so you can enjoy lifelong injury-free running. So in the analogy of building the house, this is pouring the foundation. This is like leveling the land, pouring the foundation. You need a strong foundation for which all of your running is going to be built upon. And this is where a lot of, runners who've been running their whole lives, they either don't like to do strength training or they don't know how to do strength training for running. So there are a couple of keys that you really want to make sure that you hit here. So I'll kind of, overview these. Is like, you do want to activate run specific muscles. So there are some key muscles that you want to learn how to turn on. So for example, like your side hip muscles, your glute medius is a big one that is commonly weak and is a huge contributor to a lot of running related injuries, whether it's posterior tibial tendinopathy, whether it is plantar fasciitis, whether it is runner's knee, IT band syndrome. All of those within the literature have been linked to weakness in this muscle group. It's also the most common like gait impairment that I assess in my runners when we look at their running form, is they have this hip drop where they're dropping down on one side. So if you can actually teach someone how to activate that muscle, strengthen that muscle, and then use it in function with higher level exercises, then when they're running, they're not going to have that hip drop. So you're kind of getting down to like the root cause. So I always start with the activation first. And I know this is like a loaded topic in terms of like strength training for running. My philosophy is really pretty simple: is you got to start with the basics, the simple activation exercises, but we quickly move off of there. So all of the runners in our community, they'll start with that for 3 to 4 weeks. And then we build from there on building strength on one leg, because we're always on one leg when we're running. Adding in jump training, because running is literally a series of hops from one foot to the other. So we have to train our tendons, our muscles, our calf muscles, our Achilles tendon to work plyometrically, because that's what we're doing for thousands and thousands of steps during a run. And then we need to progress resistance and add load, add weight, and be able to build strength. And then finally, we need to periodize our training, meaning we need to have different cycles in which we do different types of strength training throughout the calendar year. That your strength training is going to look different in your off season, your base building season, than it's going to look when you're peaking in marathon training or when you're recovering from marathon training. So we need to make sure that it does change throughout the year. It should not be you do these 5 exercises as a runner for the rest of your life, 365 days out of the year or 12 months out of the year. It should be kind of periodized, if that makes sense.
Oh, it really does. Yeah, I that was one thing I took out of Joe Friel's book, The Triathlon Training Bible, a couple of years ago when I first read it. Was I'd never heard anyone in the running scene speak to he's got an engineering background, so it was quite thorough in his approach by the nature of what he used to do. But like just hearing him explain the reason, which you've done beautifully, just briefly, there was so helpful because I'm like, oh, okay, well, obviously I'm not going to lift the same load the week before a marathon race as what I am in my off season. And yeah, that helped me really form a nice foundation or a mental picture around like what a successful or what a well-planned training block looks like. And I mean, as I said at the outset, I've been involved in the sport for a long time now. And I think if I haven't heard of it that much, I can't imagine that the community level athlete would have been paying that much attention to it by nature of, all the things that there are to focus on. namely of which I think we're moving into next is this idea of just focusing on the run plan. I mean, it's so easy to jump online and go, oh, there's a 5K training plan. I'll start here. But without a number of other questions about times and duration and build up and injury history, I guess just having a run plan can sort of leave you in limbo as to, whether or not it's going to be the right choice for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the strength training piece before we kind of move off of that, like that can look as simple as like I created a 25-minute strength workout for runners as like a level one, like great place to start. It's on my YouTube channel, where you can learn these exercises, you can do them yourselves. You are going to feel stronger. Your legs are going to feel like better during your runs by just implementing that. But that's not like, again, the end all be all, but that's like a great starting point. And then you should adjust the frequency at which you're strength training, whether you're doing it 1 day, 2 or 3 days, during the week, depending upon the season that you're in your running journey. So that's a variable that you want to change as well. And then, the whole aspect of sometimes people are doing these HIIT classes and they're doing quote unquote cardio fitness, where, they're just doing basically lighter weights or like, 100 body squats, 50 lunges. Like we don't need to train as runners. Like we're already endurance athletes and doing, that's our cardio. We don't want our strength training to look like that. So you want to make sure that you're stabilizing, you're activating muscles, you're getting good stability on one leg, and then you are lifting heavier, progressing load, and having less reps.
Yeah.
So, having 6 to 12 repetitions, like in that range, and not doing anything higher than that, I think is really important for us as runners in building strong, resilient bodies that are going to prevent injuries.
Yeah. Yeah. Really well said. Really well said. I'm just thinking about, I think it was Kate Edwards that you referred to earlier in the podcast when you were speaking about the disconnect between the medical world and the runners who go and see them from time to time. For anyone who's enjoying what you're saying about this as well, I recommend you go and check that episode out as well, because she had some really cool thoughts that I think complement what you're saying in the world of strength. I had Angelo Gingerelli on a couple of years ago. He's been on a couple of times, and he was also great in terms of helping structure that off-season, on-season kind of training model, because I think I'd sort of just had that bro gym routine where I'd go in, it was biceps, triceps, rack 'em.
Oh,
And you
yeah.
think about how that correlates to running performance, and I think it's maybe next to zero. Yeah, so to have
Yeah.
some form of structure like the YouTube video that you spoke about, which I'll make sure I'll link in this episode, or a scaffold of one of those guests that I just mentioned, I think is a really great place to start. I mean, run plan is something that we're a little more familiar with, but I'm sure you've got some interesting thoughts around what we should be looking for when we select a particular run plan, or start to begin that process of figuring out what is the right one for us right now.
Yeah. So just looking, I guess, like big picture wise, we want to look at these kind of macro cycles and, just think over like a calendar year. First off, with your running goals, like you want to pick a focus on, are you focusing on getting faster during this time period? Are you focusing on running shorter races like 5K, 10K? Or is your focus going to be like marathon training? Because sometimes you see a lot of runners that do a lot of races and they don't have a focus. And it's kind of confusing. They're doing everything. And it's really hard to pick the right run plan if your goal is kind of scattered. So think big picture wise, what are you going to be focusing on the spring, summer, fall, winter, right? Where is your focus going to be? And then, basing your run plan around, generally speaking, like 4 types of runs, whether it's, the easy run is going to be like the majority of your runs, right? Long runs are super important for building out our endurance, and then adding in tempo, threshold, kind of effort runs, and then intervals, right? So you want to think of doing different types of runs. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention strides at least once a week. I love them for like a running form standpoint, a running drill. It's usually the first introduction into faster running that I give my athletes, whether they're injured or not injured. And it's kind of like testing the waters. Where I see people get it wrong is they're doing too much of the speed work, and they're maybe not ready. They didn't go from strides to actually doing longer intervals. Or someone's doing a 3-day run plan, and one day they're doing a tempo run, one day they're doing an interval run, and one day they're doing a long run. So like literally all of their runs are hard efforts. Um, so, those are some like common mistakes that I see, but you want to think of this balance and think about, generally speaking, and talking about running frequency. I do find that a lot of runners have the misconception that they can't run back-to-back days because they've always had knee pain or they've always get shin splints. I find that is definitely not true in the runners that I've helped over a 20-year career with shin splints, runner's knee. The more frequent you actually run, you allow your body to adapt to the demands of running better. And you spread out the mileage throughout the week, as opposed to maybe making every run that you're doing a medium long run, essentially, right? Or every run, and I'll see this a lot as well. Common mistake is, a lot of runners are like, yeah, I run 3 days a week. I do 5 miles every day I run, or I run 6 miles every day I run. I love to go for like a 10K run every day, and I do it 3 times a week. So they're always kind of running this harder effort or distance, maybe for their fitness level. So this is like the example of someone who is not a frequent marathon runner, but they're just a recreational runner, and maybe they're not even doing a lot of races, but they're just doing like 10K a day, 3 to 4 times a week. Like, you're going to allow your body to adapt to demands better if you have a shortest run of the week, a longest run of the week, and then you have some in the middle, right? And maybe you're running different paces on those runs, as opposed to every run that you're doing is above your easy zone. So now all of this kind of micro trauma, if you will, your tissues are being stressed more than they should be stressed during your runs. And that usually leads to this accumulated fatigue over time, leads to a lot of running related injuries that I do wind up seeing. So kind of running slower is always going to be a thing, but then sprinkling in these different types of run and adding in speed work once you have a base level of training established, that you've been running consistently 3, 4, 5 days a week at easy conversational pace. You have the weekly mileage built up, and now we could start to add in some faster elements of running.
Yeah, it is so interesting that our desire is to always, it seems, run longer and run harder. And like the more of that we do, the better we feel that we're doing. Actually, just before I jumped on here, I got an athlete I just started working with in Sydney, and he's training for a marathon. And one of the little adjustments that I've made to start with our time together, we've literally just started our first week, was so he'd been doing 2 workouts. He's 48. He'd been doing 2 solid workouts a week and then a long run. And then on his other days, he'd been doing some cross training on the bike and things like that. And just through like a whole series of questions, and feel free to share your insight here, because I'd love to know what you think. I thought at maximum we would give him like 3 harder sessions over the course of a 2-week period, rather than 2 sessions and a long run every week, because I think one of his frustrations was that he hadn't seen the improvement that he wanted to see, even with the intensity of the training. And I looked at his training week and I thought, this is really intense. Like, I don't know many athletes at the peak of their career who are putting in this kind of intensity. And so I kind of looked at it from the perspective of maybe there'd be some more benefit to actually reducing a little bit of the intensity in terms of those sessions, give him a little more time for recovery. And then rather than doing, just a long, slow, easy run, if we had to, that third harder session in that 2-week period might be a little more intensity over the course of that longer run. And the reason for that is his main goal at the moment is running marathons. And anyway, I know it's sort of hard to diagnose it just with such a brief overview, but I think sometimes we fall victim of thinking, okay, more is always better. And it's interesting that sometimes the complete opposite of that is true.
Absolutely. And I would, add to that. I feel very strongly that mid 40s and 50-year-old marathoners, honestly, they don't need the track work and, repeat 400s, 800s to get faster. I do find actually, well-programmed tempo runs going at threshold effort, and then doing those long runs. We like to call them long runs with spice, right? Like making workouts into those long runs, going at marathon pace miles, and, maybe adding in a couple of threshold paced miles in there, are going to actually translate to better marathon performance. as opposed to trying to run really fast for shorter distances and doing like, the track workouts. And I do find that it's very rare that I actually stopped programming, because I really don't think someone who has had an injury history or they're having a plateau in their mid 40s, 50s, that for them to do like a tempo threshold workout, an interval or track workout, and do a long run all within a marathon build, most will not be able to tolerate, and it will lead to overtraining. And maybe that's why this person hasn't plateaued, because they're actually overtraining, and their fitness level is not improving. So, they're not getting in that recovery that they need, which kind of is another point we'll talk about, that recovery is a part of the training.
Yeah,
But
well, maybe we could segue into that. It seems like a beautiful segue. It'd be remiss to avoid such a beautiful transition.
yeah. So recovery is a part of the training. And, the big keys with recovery is, number one, the low-hanging fruit that no one gets enough of is sleep, and guilty as charged. Like that is literally the thing that I've continued to work on. And I am actually, I'll give myself a little shout out here, because I am proud of myself for, I'm in a marathon build right now. My goal race is in less than 2 weeks. And I have gotten the best sleep that I've ever gotten during a marathon build. So as I mentioned to you before, I did the whole PhD thing while I was kind of working full time, having the business, being an active dad, all of that. When I was going to PhD school, I literally got 4 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah.
Like terrible, terrible. Like would highly not recommend. I did it for 6 years of life. So once that was done, once I graduated, I started getting like 6 hours of sleep, or 5.5. And I'd be like, this is so much better than what my life used to be. So I thought that was great. But as I really, got into marathons and realized, no, Duane, like that is not enough sleep to recover from the hard workouts and the efforts that you're doing. So yeah, 7 hours for me is like really, really good. And I've gotten the most 7 hours of sleep that I've gotten ever in my life, probably in this last year. So I'm proud of that. But sleep is like literally like most people are focused on the 1% of like what is the latest super shoe, bicarb, whatever supplement like you want to throw out there. They think that's going to make their marathon performance better, or whatever running goal. Like sleep, literally, if you did that consistently, your performance will improve. So that's definitely number one, is getting not only more sleep, but better quality sleep. And that's something I learned a lot about these last couple of years, and really allowing you to get deeper sleep, by calming the mind, right? Like before you go to bed, get in a nice sleep hygiene habit. And whether it's reading, meditation, journaling, like all of those things I've embraced before I actually go to sleep, right? So you can actually sleep deeper, your brain shut off, and it's not like, thinking about everything that you did that day or that you have to do the next day. So sleep's number one. Foam rolling can be extremely important for recovery, just increasing blood flow. So whatever, and we can substitute in here your favorite soft tissue weapon of choice, I like to say, whether it's like percussion gun, your massage stick, your foam roller, right? Like what is going to improve blood flow into your tissues that can help that recovery process to occur after the runs that you're doing. If you like to do stretching, yoga, like this would fall in this kind of bucket. Going for massages. First time in my life I've ever done this on a routine basis as well. Probably got more massages this past year than that literally got my whole life. But it is important to like restore the body back from the hard training that we're doing. And, adding some of that treatment to the soft tissue, so you don't have these chronic trigger points that can happen in muscles over time. And the muscles function differently, they fire differently. You get into like abnormal movement patterns. So it is kind of nice to do some of that self-care to your body when you can get it in. Foot care, especially important as well. Big fan of like toe splays, toe spacers, and really make sure we get blood flow into the deep muscles in our foot, prevent like a lot of toe deformities, especially if you are wearing a lot of like super shoes and like shoes that are really closing down your toes. That's super important as well. Yeah, Epsom salt baths, another like, handy thing, but just the run plan and your overall weekly training, making sure there is a rest recovery day, like where you're not strength training, not running, you're not doing hot yoga or like power yoga, because that is not restorative, right? Like you have to have one day on the calendar that is complete rest recovery, allows your body to recover from your efforts. So then you can hit the training hard. And just, yeah, just making sure the recovery as far as like mental stress we talked about before, you're really maximizing all of that after hard effort. So after hard speed days, after hard long runs, don't go being on your feet like all day long after a hard long run. Or like I did a lot of teaching where I'd be like giving lectures, I'm on my feet, or I'm in the lab, I'm doing like these manual techniques and teaching students on like a concrete floor for 6 hours. Like, no, I'm not going to do a hard long run and then go do that, because now I'm not allowing my body to recover at all. So recovery is like super important and is a part of the training.
Yeah, no, really well said. I like that description of the toe spaces as well. I haven't heard that one, but as you were saying it, I was like, yeah, that does sound glorious. That's really
It
enjoyable. Um,
is.
I mean, nutrition obviously fits under the umbrella of not only recovery, but also fueling for a race day. So maybe we could shift into that. I'm always interested to hear, because I think, like a lot of these things, it's so funny how we overlook. I mean, sleep was a great example. For whatever reason, we overlook the simple, obvious factors in the hunt for some mysterious 1% bicarb soda. But it's interesting, like, doesn't matter how much bicarb soda you have, if you're getting zero sleep, you're probably not going to be performing your best. And the nutrition, I mean, the Aussie diet's no better. I mean, the standard American diet's pretty, the acronym is SAD, like it fits beautifully. So many of the foods that we think we're eating that we believe to be nutritious or healthy, in fact, quite the opposite. And so the fueling for a marathon or the training is probably not optimal. But what are your thoughts around nutrition, fueling, recovery?
Yeah, so nutrition is such an important element. We have like a registered sports dietitian in our community, and she's taught me like so much, over these last 5 years. And there is a link between injuries, first off, and underfueling. So there is research to support that, where it is really important in staying healthy. And a lot of people don't realize that. And there are a lot of runners who either get into running because they have weight loss goals, and usually what comes with that is they start restricting their nutrition, their diet. And now you're actually putting more stresses to your body and running where you're underfueled. So that actually opens up the risk for running related injuries, and you feel crappy on your runs. You don't have energy. You're maybe not hitting workouts like you would like to. You're not improving in your running journey and getting faster, right? Like it leads to all of those things. So making sure that your fueling is on board, your hydration, and then definitely like electrolytes in terms of like
Yeah,
performance wise is all part of the equation. And you have to fuel, hydrate, all of that before your run, during your run, and after your run for recovery, as we just talked about before. So you have to just, this is a part of you being a runner, is that has to happen. And it's most important for the longer duration that you race. So the marathon, it's like literally it's like the deal breaker, right? Most people, myself included, my first marathon, I knew nothing about electrolytes. I didn't fuel properly. I definitely didn't have enough carbs. I didn't practice with it during training. So my stomach didn't like it on race day, right? This is all common story for most runners. I cramped up mile 20, did the slow death march, every muscle cramping in my body, the worst 6 miles of my life, right? Like finished the marathon, but it was not, it was so unpleasant, Tyson. It took me 5 years to actually go back for seconds to like do the marathon again, right? Like I hate for runners to feel that. And it's so simple to actually add in proper fueling. And the thing I hear so much from runners is, well, I can run for like an hour, hour and a half, even 2 hours. I don't need to fuel. I feel fine. But you're leaving so much performance on the table, because just imagine if you did fuel for that, or imagine if you did that in training. So on race day, your gut actually knew how to digest carbs while all your blood flow is going to your muscles to actually run the race. And now it doesn't get upset. So if you've ever struggled with bloating, gas, visiting the porta potty during a race, can't get down your gels because you get nauseous, or it's all because you haven't trained your gut yet. And meaning you haven't practiced fueling. And even for easy runs, I get a lot of runners that are, well, I'm just going out for like 30, 40 minutes. Like I don't need a fuel, or I'm going out. It's early in the morning. I'm not hungry. No one's hungry at 5 or 6 a.m. Right. Let's be honest. Like no one's getting up and like, oh yeah, let's, dive in and have, something to eat, but you have to train your gut. So having those simple carbs that's easily digestible and practicing it during training, so then you can utilize that for the race, is super important. And just before, during, and then after.
Yeah. No, really well said. I can't remember what the last one was, but I know we've gone 5 out of the 6, and we're closing this bad boy up. But what have we
Yeah.
talked?
The sixth is really the race strategy.
Yeah.
Is really, for those that like to do races and challenge themselves, you have to really make a race day game plan. So you have to plan out like what you're going to actually need for race day. So we have a nice little checklist that you can kind of make sure you don't forget things, set out the schedule in, getting to your race, all of that, but then having a smart race strategy. And again, I kind of alluded to this before, but you want the beginning of your race. So let's take the half marathon distance, for example. First 3 miles of the half marathon should be your slowest miles during the whole half marathon. And if you do that, you're going to put yourself in a nice position to run your middle miles at your goal pace. And you're going to have energy at the end during the last 5K to close hard, pass people, feel strong, and run faster. If you're starting out in your running journey, the most common mistakes everyone makes is they go out too hot and they're feeling great. Of course, because you have all this adrenaline happening, and you will have adrenaline on a race day. You're going to be surrounded by all these people. You're going to want to just like run at the pace other people are running, but you have to really think about where is your level of fitness, kind of rein it back and be able to run a smart strategy. And then, these strategies change depending upon course profile, of course. And then the marathon, same thing, is just making sure you have a really conservative start, and then be able to have those middle miles that you're running at a, relatively moderate to hard effort. So then at the end, you do, have a kick, and you can finish feeling strong, because it's never fun. And you never feel good about yourself when you're literally like limping to the finish line and everyone's been passing you forever. It's like defeating, right? We don't want that. We don't want that for you.
We all fall into that mindset of like the primary school athlete. I remember what it was like at the start of school cross country when everyone would run. Actually, I've got an athlete on the other side of the country to you, Tim Rich. He's in Seattle, and he just had a 5K race on, I don't know what day it was over there, maybe Sunday, May the 4th. And we had this conversation on like a couple of days before. Let's be more cautious with the race strategy, because it was slightly uphill on the way out and it was downhill. And he emailed me yesterday and he goes, "Hey, we did it." Like he'd run a good time. And he goes, "I wasn't getting absolutely annihilated." He goes, who would have thought I could enjoy the end of a race?" And yeah, it was something that, I mean, you and I obviously both do, but if you can avoid the frustration of bombing that last couple of miles of a race, it's so much more enjoyable.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is part of kind of growing in your running journey, is just learning how to race and the art of it and preparing properly. So that's why it is kind of one of those, 6 steps to growing in your running journey.
Man, that was awesome. That was really good. Well, for everyone who's interested, as I said, I'll make sure I link all your stuff in the description to this episode, both here on YouTube, but also on the audio version of the podcast. So if you want to get in touch with Duane, that's where you can find it. But man, really appreciate you making the time to come on. I knew I was going to enjoy it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Tyson. This has been a great conversation, and I just remember that if you are aging, you can continue to actually grow in your running journey. You can do it without getting injured, and you can improve actually as you get older. That is possible. So just remember that you can do that. I want you to remember that we can get stronger, can get faster, and enjoy lifelong injury-free running. So thanks for having me, Tyson.